Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We have a show where we're going to discuss universal basic income. The question is, what is it? Well, we're going to get into that point and much other levels of conversation that are related to that. First, let me share with you the honor of having two wonderful guests. One of them is Dr. Ph.D. André Coelho. He is in Portugal right now, and he's coming in and sharing with us his views and perspective. His background is civil engineering. He has a PhD and a postdoc. So construction materials, construction and demolition waste from Lisbon Technical Institute, a wonderful place. I've read several places about that, and it's just great insights. He has publications in national and international scientific journals. Andre is founder and engineer at Ecoperfil and designing and promoting sustainable urban systems. He's also a musician, double bass player, and includes backgrounds into Portugal Jazz School and on and on. This is un aplauso for Andre. There's a lot of things to do. And he's also a father of a teen. I'm trying to help him out here. Well, we all need those when we have a teenage children. Cesar Caballero is Dean Emeritus from the University and Library of the Cal State University San Bernardino. He's a man of the community. He's a man who looks out for ways to advance the communities. He was in the position since 2007, acting dean at Cal State Los Angeles. His experience as a librarian includes El Paso, UT, and other positions in collection librarians. And strategic planner with a passion for creating and delivering excellent library services and resources in academic libraries. And he has other co-chairs. My God, I'll be here all day reading this, Cesar, but I can't help you. I can't say how wonderful it is to have you. But more than anything, you've extended yourself also as a friend like Andre to help out on other projects. Thank you for helping me to have a archive in the college. Again, thanks to you and Felix Zuniga, PhD. And so we come together. But you guys have a lot of background, but not necessarily in universal basic income per se. We're sort of gathering information, and Andre has for much longer time been dealing with it. And thanks to him, he brought me in and sort of helped me to educate myself on it. But that's been over the years. So now let's bring it to the surface, to the present, and find out, first of all, what it is and why each one of us thinks this issue is important. So let me pass it on to Andre. Andre, what is UBI?
Thanks for this wonderful presentation of the speakers. It's great to be here. Nice seeing you again. Thank you. And nice to meet you, Cesar. This subject of UBI, Universal Basic Income, does interest me for a long time now. I was a member of BIEN, Basic Income Earth Network. And although I'm not a member anymore, I still believe in the idea, and it has a lot of potential and a lot of potential crises dealing with its implementation, because there's a lot of resistance to it. Maybe I could present a short definition of UBI. Pretty straightforward, unconditional, as in no strings attached. You just get this support without conditions, which is unusual. Basic, because it is meant to support basic needs. Each person knows what his or her basic needs are. So no meddling with what are the needs. Unconditional, basic, and income. Income in the term that it's cash. It is money, not a bed, not a car. It's money, it's cash. So I think I mentioned the three words: unconditional basic income, and put together, it's a stipend. It's like a salary. You get it no matter what, and you just need to be alive, to have a heartbeat. That's, for me, enough definition. If Cesar wants to present a bit of himself now, and we can talk a bit in a moment.
It's a working definition, but what I'd like to do at this point is sort of ask each of us to share what is it that makes us interested in the subject matter? What motivated us to look into this, to scratch the surface and say, what is UBI? And I'll pass it over to Cesar. Cesar, what motivated you to be interested in this subject?
It started with the fact that we all have experienced to some degree in the United States a form of universal basic income. And I'll bring up the fact that during the pandemic, a lot of people in the community throughout the US received a certain amount of money directly into their bank accounts, which was surprising to me. I had never seen that happen in the US before, but it did. I mean, a lot of people received money, and a lot of people in California are still receiving some kind of stipend. Mm-hmm. So it has made me think, for example, within the university, the government sent a big amount of money to be distributed to needy students. Well, at the university where I work, Cal State San Bernardino, over 75% of the student body falls within the needy category. And most people get their tuition paid through government grants. A lot of our students were receiving a stipend during the pandemic years. So yeah, it made me think a lot about, okay, so we can do, as a society, we can do this. Why shouldn't we be able to do it for a greater number of the population that may be needy? Single mothers, single fathers, people who are disabled that cannot work or can only work a few hours at a time. Not to mention the people that are in transition from current work assignments. And let me bring up the fact that because of technology, our society is facing a lot of disruption when it comes to current job assignments. I've been reading a lot about GPT lately, the application that can create poetry, can take tests, can even write a whole essay or a whole article for publication. So a lot of jobs, it's people are always saying in social media and the media, a lot of jobs are going to be displaced. Journalists are going to be displaced, might be displaced. Educators might be displaced because according to what I read, artificial intelligence like ChatGPT can create a curricular content and deliver curricular content and actually do the educational courses that are currently being taught in schools and even universities. So let me stop here and say, yeah, at some point, I think as a society, we're going to need to provide some kind of universal basic income to provide for the gap, the between jobs gap when people may not be receiving a paycheck.
Awesome. Andre, same question.
Yeah, the thing that made me initially more interested in UBI was the fact that many people was telling me, oh, we have to deserve to earn our living, to earn the right to eat, to have a house, to have clothes, to have transportation, or to have electricity. Well, and I thought about it, and it's actually not true. When a child is born, and I mean any child in any region of this planet, is born into something. It's born into a world, a social world that already exists, more technological advanced or less, with more conditions or less. But there is always something. There is, okay, let's see here in Lisbon. A child is born and has electricity, has a bus network, has internet, has constructions, has buildings, there's roads, has a lot of things that didn't contribute to, and we could argue didn't deserve. So why should that child ever be able to take advantage of that? She didn't deserve it. So the UBI idea, to me, just feeds on that that right that comes to us just by being here and using all the knowledge that other generations, knowledge and physical work inventions from previous generations of humans that came to be present right now. And so it's just nonsense to me that we have to deserve. The second core idea is that people actually experience more freedom if they get money without conditions. First, because you can see that in the experiments. Oh, people will not work. Oh, people will be lazy. It's the contrary. The numbers show that people get money and they get less stressed and have more time to look for meaningful work, and they get it, and on average. And so as experiments go and on the conceptual level, it is not true that people will do nothing, because that's contrary to our human nature. In my opinion, people want to contribute. They just need an opportunity to contribute. And that, unfortunately, means money most of the time to satisfy basic needs while a person is searching for an occupation, for a way to contribute to this society. So for me, it's always a matter of freedom and justice. That's the third core idea, because poverty is just nonsensical. Poverty to me makes absolutely no sense. First, because it's totally unfair that a bunch of people just don't get enough resources because they were born in poor neighborhoods and didn't have access to the same opportunities, couldn't take a degree, couldn't make these social ladder steps to make a successful life in the professionally, and so they end up poor, and their kids are poor, and it gets perpetual like this. And that's just not fair, because everyone has potential and everyone has capacities that can be developed. And also, poverty is expensive because it's a huge weight. Here in Portugal, at least, poverty surely is more expensive than preventing poverty. I don't even have to push numbers around, because the social security system is so heavy. The expenses in policing and in housing improvising solutions around housing for poor people, and all the conditions associated with supposedly helping the poor, plus the health issues, the hospitalizations, the mental health. It's all cumbersome and nonsensical to me. So ending poverty with UBI is just pure sense reasoning and plain justice.
Okay, I'll set my reasoning for talking about this, for me, very, very important topic. First of all, I've had the benefit of traveling to all 7 continents, and it's been an education above my wildest dreams. My wife and I have gone everywhere practically. And the second thing is that I was raised in Mexico, and I live very well. I live very comfortably, and never had any financial issues there. But I lived amongst people that were very, very poor, very desolate. People were living in, seeing people living in shacks made out of cardboard or whatever they could find. And it was very eye-opening to see that people still live like that even today. So what happened one day was when I was in one of my college courses and we were reviewing the French Revolution, the classic statement came up back then in college. People in France were starving to death. The issue was brought up to the royalty, and they quote Marie Antoinette as saying it, which it was just more probably a myth, but it makes the sense. They come up to her. She's living in an extremely lavish life. You see the French homes, and there are acres and acres and acres of sizes, and they got 60, 80, 90, 100 rooms. they're the leadership of the country. They come up to him and they come up to Marie Antoinette and says, the people are starving to death. They don't have bread. And her response was, well, let them have cake. In other words, dismissing the poor. Of course, that led up to the French Revolution, that they brought down the country and they had to reconstruct it, the idea. Unfortunately, I think we're back there again. How many homeless people can we have out in the streets before our security, those of us that did not live out on the street, is threatened? How many people can we have in poverty? 5%, 10%, 20%? Can we have them out in the streets and still feel safe, where I can go to my car and I feel I'm going to be robbed at the gas station? How many jails do we continue to build that we say, well, we put these people in jail and pay 40, 50, 60,000 a year for each one to keep our safety? And at the end of the day, can you keep them there their whole lives, or do you have to push them back into society? So to me, it's a safety issue. And wherever I've traveled around the world, where there's too many poor people, you start seeing electrical wires coming around their houses. You start seeing people living in communes where they have security all 24/7 around them. And it's, at the end of the day, it's not going to stop. It's going to make matters worse. So to me, I'm approaching it from a self-protection point of view. Everyone is threatened in their security to live. If we have more poor people who do not have their basic incomes met, then they're going to have to do desperate things to feed themselves and feed their children. And that's, I go back to what André said. Where do we benefit having so many poor people? How do we benefit? That's where my motivation comes in, to learn more about this. I don't want that to happen in this country or any country. So let me quickly make a few remarks based on what André and Cesar said. And I'm sort of building on this, and then we'll open it up for discussion. I think Cesar mentioned something that it's basically a new discussion. We used to think of robots going after manual jobs at the low end financial scale of income. Now, this chat and others are coming after white collar jobs. So bankers, lawyers, writers, people who made their money with their brains, they're getting kicked out. The IT companies are showing that right now. Another point that Cesar brought up is that now, given this system that we have in front of us, you can take one teacher and teach 1,000 students, or record, and students don't have to go to campuses anymore. So how many professors are out of a job? The perspective that a lot of people say, well, if they're not working, they shouldn't get anything. But my last point here is, we subsidize farmers not to grow. We subsidize companies to do things that don't work out. We subsidize a lot of things that the company will ultimately only benefit. And we subsidize a military complex around the world that is just gobbling up money like there's no tomorrow. So why not take that money and put it back into the people?
That's a workload, huh? we have to discuss. Thanks for your contribution. And when Cesar talked about teachers and displacing teachers with this new IT tool, I was thinking, you cannot replace human teachers. Not like that, I guess, because humans learn from other humans. We are not turning into machines. Just because we are inventing machines, we are not turning into machines. And so we still need humans to motivate you, to have a human contact and learn better like that. Of course, IT can help, and it will help a lot in the next few years. But in my opinion, teaching is actually not a very good example, even though all those machines can make teaching better, I guess.
Andre, not to contradict you completely regarding the concept of
completely, some of it, but not completely. I like that line, very political. I like that.
But I'll give you the example of the fact that I have a good number of grandchildren and even great-grandchildren now from my wife's side, and those kids, if we let them, They spend the whole day holding a little tablet, entertaining themselves with games, luckily with some educational programs. Maybe your generation and my generation, our generation, prefer the human interaction. I hate to say it, but when I see the new generations that are coming behind us, they've embraced the robots in a way that I never thought we would embrace them.
Even still, I mean, I also see that. Okay, I also see that in kids. I see that in my daughter. I see that in most kids nowadays. But I also see that as a problem.
It is a problem.
As
Yes.
something
It's a problem.
pathological, not as
It
a
is.
tendency for humans in the future, because we are social beings, social organisms.
I
We
agree.
cannot
Yeah.
replace that in our brains, deep down in our brains.
But
to
let me
socialize.
let's cut up the educational level in systems that is already naturally there. I totally agree. I never see a robot taking care of a kindergarten kid. I don't see that. Elementary school teachers, I think we will always need them. But I think the pandemic showed us that we don't necessarily need college professors on a 30-to-1. And I will also share that thanks to San Bernardino, Cal State San Bernardino, they showed me a program years ago, long before the pandemic, where they have a remote teaching. One professor on 3 campuses across Southern California. The one professor teaches subject X, Y, or Z on everything is controlled. The students, college students, are in different campuses, 50, 60 miles from each other minimum. And at the end of the day, if there's any papers to be corrected and all that, they have TAs on site that correct the papers there. Or like at UCLA, where their classes are 200-300 students, and then they break down into small groups, and then somebody grades them. It's not the professor. He or she already finished their lecture. I mean, I already saw that, I gotta say, at least 10 years ago. So the number of professors that you need keeps diminishing. Why can't I take college courses in Harvard and Oxford? Why do I have to take them only at this campus or that campus? And I think we're reducing the number of people we need at the intellectual level, or white collar level, as they call them. I think and then the computers are taking these jobs away also.
Okay, I won't
Yeah.
disagree with that. Although the human factor is not to be totally erased, I guess, or else we're leading into a dystopia of some kind. But I wouldn't to focus this conversation on computerization, although it's an issue, a pressing issue. I guess it's not only in teaching, is it like in engineering also, I guess. And there was a study years ago from Oxford that concluded that like 47% of all jobs will be displaced in 20 years. So that was like 5 or 6 years ago. So we are 30% on the way to reach that point. The sheer mass of people unemployed is so great potentially that we cannot just let it fall like that. We need to have some backup plan, I guess.
Yeah.
Cesar?
You know, when I was a kiddo, I enjoyed reading journals and magazines that talked about futuristic scenarios. I remember reading an article that talked about how robots in the future were going to make life for human beings so positive, because we were going to be able to be leisurely about our lives. and now we're into the future, and yeah, we have robots and we have mechanization and automation, but you know, as we've been saying, we have all these social ills, homelessness, poverty, health services that are lacking in many communities. And so what comes to mind to me is, you know, the questions of why have we as human beings evolved such technologically and in terms of wealth? Why do we continue to keep these social ills among us? That's a big question, and it talks about, that's when we start getting into conversations of national and world economics, right? And we have to say it. We have to say it. With rampant capitalism as we have it now, a few families own the means of production. I think it's like 2-3% of the families in the US and about 2-3% of the families in the world own the means of production and the wealth. So that means that everybody else are peons if they're allowed into the complex of production, and the rest are in the fringes outside these societies in the industries of the society. And it was Joseph Campbell, the anthropologist, sociologist, who in one of his books, I don't remember which one, but he wrote in one of his books that because he was already delving into these topics about 10, almost 20 years ago. Joseph Campbell said, it's the breakup of the tribe, the tribal groups in the society are part of the reason we have a lot of these social ills. Because in the older days, when at least he was saying that at least with the tribal groups being tied and all that, that people would be embraced and provided for, regardless, and provided for their needs, regardless of where they were productive or not. And so he was idealizing tribal societies that way. I'm not sure that that's entirely true, but at least it gives us a perspective in terms of thinking about, yeah, when we talk to youngsters nowadays, as they start growing up, sometimes they're rebelling against the family because they don't see why they should go to school most of the day. They don't really see where their future is within the society. They're wondering what they're gonna do after high school, and a lot of them graduate and there's nothing for them to do. It isn't like the society holds them by the hand and shows them this is what you're gonna do.
Don't say that to Andre. He's got a 13-year-old. Don't take him there yet.
Anyway,
let him find that out on his own, as he's already finding out.
My daughter
I'll
complains
stop on
about
the
school
philosophizing,
every day.
and then in a little while, I'd like to share some examples of where UBI has been able to succeed.
Let me come back to that, but let me give it back to Andre, and then I want to share something that Andre gave me an insight that really just pushed everything in my mind and organized it. But Andre, you have the floor.
No, I was about to answer that. My daughter complains about school every day. Every day she says school is boring. Teachers are boring. Teachers don't listen to us. They insult us. They call us, stupid. They call us loud and inattentive. Some of these teachers are like 60 plus. They have this authoritarian and I cannot say the word.
No, you're right.
From authority.
Sure.
Program inside of them to push, like they are the professor, they have the knowledge, they will transmit. They cannot take the kids' view. They cannot dialogue with them. They don't understand them. And they don't understand the age they are in, like these hormones popping all day long. They are loud because they must, because they are trying to express themselves. They have other things to think about, they feel a lot of things, and school is completely disconnected with that.
That's a whole different show. I really, no, and not to diminish the importance. I think it's just a massive issue, one that that we can come back to that, the education of the modern child, given technology and all that. But let me direct it again back universal basic income. Andre said something to me and it struck me. It struck me like lightning. And I kept working with it, and it just brought a lot of things to the surface that made sense to me now. And when I read things, so I want to get back to Andre and sort of shake his mind a little bit and have him remember what he said to me and have him explain it. Andre, who is pushing the idea of universal basic income? Where did the stimulus start coming? Do you remember that conversation we had several years ago? Because your answer just blew me away. He says
Please
the
remind me.
idea is coming out of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
You remember?
There are some people there that see
They
into the future, let's say.
the idea of UBI was seated in Silicon Valley. It wasn't some social group, it wasn't some political group, that it originated out of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, okay, that's true, but that's not the whole truth. There
Right.
are
Around here,
that-
we're having partial truths and some truths and all that.
there is no unique place. UBI has like 500 years of stories until now. It comes and goes. It gets more feedback, then less feedback, then it comes again. There are lots of people that, like in the shadow, believe it and want to push it forward, but there's this whole wave of resistance. Like just the other day, my ex-wife was saying to my daughter that all these poor people around, they are poor because they don't want to work, and so they rightly are poor. Like, to me, that it hurts me, because she's telling, that's the mother of my child telling her something that I completely disagree with. It makes totally no sense to me, and it's humiliating to the humankind. These people, just, they don't have as much money as I do or her, but they are people, right? They have a long evolutionary history. Our genes come from not generations behind, not 10 generations, but like 1,000 generations or more. It's a whole organism. A poor person can be poor now, but in a few years can be rich and then come back to poorness. A life can change. We are not what we appear at a certain moment in time. We can change. We have capacities. Unfortunately, many people don't get the chance to develop those capacities. That's, I think, what it means to be poor. I was never poor, fortunately, but I imagine the limitations, thinking about the next meal, thinking about paying the rent, thinking about paying the school for the kids. That's too much stress. That's surely maddening, to wake up every day and not know if you're going to have money for the school bus or the food for the next day or something. I really cannot imagine the stress, right?
Well, I agree with everything that our friend is saying, Andre, but I'd like to mention some of the places where universal basic income has actually worked in reducing poverty levels, reducing income inequality, and maybe even eliminating some government programs. For example, in Kenya and Finland, according to some of the stuff that I read, participants' health conditions improved significantly. They experienced, and I wrote a few items I wouldn't forget: better nutrition, especially for children, improved access to clean water, sanitation, and medicine, resulted in fewer hospitalizations, lower rates of stress and depression, better education for children, and importantly, higher levels of happiness. Yeah, so there were also some countries, I'll mention some countries that have had experiments besides the US. Canada, Brazil, Finland, Namibia, and India have had fairly successful experiments. And what I found out also is that there's currently plans for some new programs, not only in the US, but abroad.
I was in Switzerland when they were voting on it and they did not pass. And they said, well, it's on the agenda for next year again. So apparently they keep doing it every year until people finally figure it out that it's necessary. And I like that attitude. I want to piggyback on something that was said earlier in this area as well, in the universal basic income. If we had this conversation 10 years ago, I would have said, we're going to have an esoteric conversation. We're just going to sit back, have our little vinito, and just talk about the future, blah, blah, blah. Today, having this conversation, I think, no, this is reality. People are losing their jobs to automation. at all levels. And the ones that are getting the attention, I believe, in the major newspaper is the high-ended one. Again, the white-collar areas. The idea that lawyers and bankers and accountants are seeing their jobs being diminished. Less people are doing income taxes through people. They're doing it through robotics. So I think that we better try to help people get ahead of the problem instead of saying, oh my gosh, we're sinking. Let's talk about keeping the ship afloat rather than how do we get into the little life rafts and try to save ourselves when a lot of people are unemployed. We have to get ahead of ourselves. And my last point before I pass it back to you guys is that we have all these new resources now. So I'm going to push one idea in today's show, and it makes me sound even stranger and more unique. We need to start taxing the computers. Computers should be paying taxes that should go to universal basic income. I'll pass it back to you guys.
A kind of technological tax, machine tax.
Yeah, machines should pay taxes.
Taxes, people pay taxes.
Machines should pay taxes.
Machines don't pay taxes because
they
they're not
should. They should. They should.
In my opinion,
that's a radical concept.
In my opinion, only people pay taxes. As only people get the UBI, you have to be a person to pay taxes or a person to get the UBI.
Well, then I'm going to argue that point. I'm going to argue that point that we need to start thinking that machines, if they're going to displace 1,000 people and they're going to do the work of 1,000 people, then they should pay the taxes of 1,000 people.
Well, Armando, you know, the big companies that own big means of production, automotive, oil, etc., giant farm production, the people and or the companies that own those computers, the machines, should be paying taxes. And if you look at what the IRS has reported recently, a lot of those companies pay little or no taxes, like the Amazons, the Facebook, a lot of those big companies pay little or no taxes, and I think the society needs to get after these guys and have them pay their share of taxes, and at least the government then would have money to address a lot of what we're talking about, to start providing some basic income for needy families and individuals in the society.
Armando, I don't think we are in short of ideas to tax. At least in Portugal, there are dozens of tax programs. I cannot even start to count them. There are just too many. You tax for the housing, you tax for the transportation, you tax for
everything,
for working, you tax for the profits, you tax for the television. You're paying tax I pay tax for everything. And
tax
public service
machines, tax the machines, tax the robots.
No, but I see Cesar's point. I think he has a point. These companies own most of the machines and they're not paying taxes. These taxes are not to be invented in the future. They already exist. They are already subject to taxes that they are avoiding. They are listing their companies in tax havens, in countries that don't have, they have lax.
Okay,
tax
let's look at a real situation. Okay, a company says, okay, Amazon, we're going to put in all these machines. We don't need 1,000 people. We're going to put in machines. What happened to the people? The people are going to go on welfare, and we're still going to have to pay for them.
They're going to go on welfare because there's no UBI.
Exactly. And
because
we're
if
asking I'm not trying to figure out where to tax the money for more people to pay more for the people who don't work. I'm saying is, why don't we go after the machines that now they're producing wealth of 1,000 machines? Why don't we extract the funds from there to help the people that now are displaced and have no jobs, or retrain, etc.? It's an idea, but it comes out of the idea that we need to find a way to make UBI a reality to a greater span of people without having to tax the people that have jobs, which I think is right now the clashing of the issue. I'm trying to get the money from another source.
which would mean a shrinking tax source, less people working, to an ever getting bigger tax recipients of the UBI, which is a problem in itself, right? If you are taxing a shrinking source, you won't have enough money to supply UBI for an ever
No.
increasing number of people.
No, I'm viewing it that the number of machines are increasing, that the funds be paid from the wealth of the machines.
That
Which
assumes that
makes-
the machines are considered entities in the eyes of the government.
From financial.
And the machines could own.
You can make
well,
corporations, you can
yeah,
make
it's the
corporations
corporations that
entities.
own the machines and amass the wealth.
Why can't you do that to machines? What makes them so special?
No, it's that they are not human, right? Only the humans that own these companies are subject to taxes, and they are not paying them. So that
They're not paying the
money,
taxes. That's part of the issue.
so that
Money.
money should already be there to eventually be distributed as an UBI. But
The
I want
majority of
to,
taxes are paid by middle and lower income people in the US and I would say throughout the world. So part of the issue is that the 3% that own the means of production and the wealth are not being taxed to redistribute some of the wealth to the needy
Yeah.
people. That's part of the issue. And we need to address that in a big way.
I would also like to point out that there is already a will to distribute. At least in Portugal, there are public services. There are public services for school.
Yeah,
There are public
some
services
countries
for
do it.
transportation.
Yeah.
There are public service for
Saudi
municipalities.
Arabia,
Many
for
things.
example, Saudi Arabia redistributes a lot of the oil wealth to its citizens in the tune of thousands of dollars, 50, 100,000 per citizen.
I've tried to become a citizen of Saudi Arabia, but they said no, I didn't qualify. I tried that one.
In the States, the only state that distributes does that kind of distribution, I found out, is Alaska. Redistributes some of its oil income to its citizens, regardless of income or work status. I think that's pretty good. Tribal groups will distribute to their tribal members based on their income from casino income. That's pretty good. On and on. But anyway, so we have some good examples of universal basic income. For future, we can talk about universal basic education.
Well,
Maybe for a future program.
unfortunately, our time won't allow for that. And I think if I'm seeing this correctly, I think we're starting to get into the subject matter where we could be here for hours. I'm drawn to a lot of different perspectives. But first of all, before I get to the closing statements area, I want to thank both of you for your time and your energy and your mindset to be able to dialogue about this and bring us. And I've learned a lot from just listening to both of you, as I always do every time I talk to you. So let me approach this as we close the show. Age before youth. So Cesar, I think you qualify to go first.
Okay. I would like to say that there are pros, like there are cons to the concept of universal basic income, but we will probably continue to see cities, states, and even the federal government continue to experiment with different forms of UBI. However, I would have to say that the concepts of individualism, aka pull yourself from your bootstraps, and rampant capitalism will probably prevent any full-scale national programs to be implemented.
Maybe as a close statement, I would just talk a little bit of another potential source of UBI, which is one that I'm a bit more involved here in Portugal. We name it from all to all. So it means that the source of money isn't some faraway company or some oil that is extracted somewhere and sold and so redistributed that wealth, which actually I think it's a bad idea because oil isn't doing any good to us. But a UBI from all to all is as simple as people get together and distribute their wealth, distribute their money into a common fund, and that fund is the source of money that gets redistributed and naturally finds the people that have less of it. So of course that when you do this, the people who have more end up giving to the ones who have less. They might not be conscious of it, but that's what happens. And so I defend that special case of UBI, which for me is much more tribal, as Cesar talked about 2 or 3 occasions in this conversation about tribal groups. That's a kind of tribal group, a tribal group that cares about money redistribution, and so puts in a common fund and redistribute it as a UBI. Just some food for thought.
Well, you both have served a great deal of thought process. I'm trying to process, and I'm trying to be part of the show as well. I have to say that for me, what I've sort of encompassed between the two of you, and then in my own thoughts, is that I believe that the barriers to something critically and important to universal basic income is wrapped up in a lot of mythology, old mythology that was implemented years ago, by who knows, and for what purpose? Well, that's to be looked at. One of the mythologies I think that I hear a lot is, well, if you give people free money, then they're all going to become lazy, and people seem to almost accept that almost as reality, or that other factors that people will take their money and use it in negative ways, blah, 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 yet ignoring how subsidies are being siphoned off to the military complex. I see that as an issue. I mean, even President Eisenhower highlighted that issue. He says, these guys can eat up the money real fast. And if we look at our federal budget in the US, we see a lot of money going to them. And so the redistribution of wealth going to people at the level of sustaining them above the poverty level minimum, I think is critical. And Andre, I know you always hit that point, and I'm always glad to hear it over and over again. My closing statement is this, that I believe, as I mentioned earlier, I think that automation is the new item in the pot, that we thought of automation as one day in the future, blah, blah, blah. And now it's here, it's accelerating, it's in our faces. We're using the technology, and yet we don't see how it impacts sometimes the economy of other people. And I think we're all involved, even the rich and the poor, that if we don't study and analyze ourselves and say, we cannot afford to have poor people on the planet. We can't have everybody moving from one country to another because there's not enough food, there's not enough wealth, there's not enough water. We're not redistributing our money, not only in our country, but globally. I think we're all going to see some major issues where all of a sudden, no matter how much money you have, it's not going to stop the international issues from impacting economics, environment, etc. And I want to thank both of you for bringing this issue to my mind, that we live in a new era and we better do something. All of us, we better have these dialogues. What do we do if our safety is given up just so that some people can have a lot of money, and we accept a large proportion of people to be homeless? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you, Armando.
Thank you. Thank you for the stimulus of we better look out for a future of ours and our own kids and grandkids and great grandkids. I'm talking about Cesar here.
Great grandkids.
All right, muchachos. Last statement. I don't want to take all the win myself.
Last statement. I would say is the topic is going to be with us continuously and in an increasing way. I just heard the news the other day that rig drivers, truck drivers, those big rigs. There's a company that has created robots that can drive those rigs. They'll be driverless trucks moving our goods back and forth in the country. That's going to displace, I'm going to guess, 50,000 to 100,000, maybe a million or 2 million workers, people that drive rigs. I was going to say 50 to 100 just in California, but it's probably more than that, probably 250,000 and a few million in the US. Anyway, that's a lot of people. A lot of us are going to be worried about, and it'll impact us, like Armando says, if we already have breaks in the chain of supply chain, where we don't find eggs at the grocery store, wait till workers get more displaced and machines take over. The transition is going to be weird because the machines are going to make all kinds of mistakes. They're going to be crashing. They're going to be delivering goods where they're not supposed to deliver. But eventually, you know, they've been made with software that where they learn from their mistakes, maybe better than human beings, and they'll take over certain functions. And so all these people are going to be displaced. I talked to my friends at the donut shop about that because a few of them drive trucks, and they don't believe me when I tell them that they're going to get displaced. They'll remember my words when they will, and it's coming soon, down a few years down the road. Anyway, I'll close up. Thank you.
Andre gets to close
Yeah,
because
just
he's
a
the one that
couple of-
he's the one that put this idea in my head,
Just
and
a
I can't
couple of
appreciate.
final words about the human condition. In these conversations, it tends to get technical pretty fast about taxes, about machines, about this job being replaced or that job being replaced, and about the dangers of unemployment and social uprising. You know, the don't haves coming after the haves, the have-nots coming after the haves. And sometimes I just feel the need to just get away from all that and think about the human condition, to give, to love, to socialize. Because sometimes people talk in such crude ways. Oh, that person is poor because she doesn't work. Or if she got free money, she wouldn't work. She wouldn't contribute. She's lazy. And that's a kind of blindness. You don't see the other person. You don't make a connection. You don't see the potential. I just send out to the world, you know, stretch your arm to somebody. Get to know that person a little better, and you'll find that there's more to the eye that meets the eye. And if everyone does that, the world changes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. Please, I can't say how wonderful it is to hear all these new ideas that we all have to sort of shake ourselves and say, you know, let me think about this. Let's continue to think about it, but also let's also think about moving into action. And I see that also from Cesar and from Andre. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being on the show. I look forward to having you in the near future and continuing the dialogue. Cesar talked something about UBI and education. Oh my gosh, that's another headache to deal with, but that's a great topic, Cesar. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to write to me and have me forward any comments to either of our wonderful guests, please do so at afsanchez66@gmail.com, and I'll immediately forward it to our two guests and see if we can respond as well. Thank you very much for being with us, and I look forward to having everyone
Bye-bye.
back together again.
Hasta la vista.
Baby.